So I want to take a minute today to tell you guys about the Perfect Jean. I've been wearing them for a few weeks now and really enjoy them, and I just want to share it with our audience. Sometimes jeans have this problem where, you guys all have seen these skinny jeans that they like crush your balls and, it's just not comfortable to wear. Or the other way around, jeans are like too baggy. You have this sort of like diaper in your ass area, it looks like. So there are these problems that, different fits of different types of jeans have. And the Perfect Jean strives to fix that. Both the fit, but also the mobility, the maneuverability. It has a stretchy fabric. Like they say it's like yoga ready, but I would say it's athletics ready. Moving furniture, doing things around the house, you're not going to have that like super tight, like constricted fit that you feel like you're not going to be able to move around in. And there are over 400,000 people out there wearing these jeans at this point, so not all of them can be wrong. I hope you guys will go and check them out. So a few scenarios where you can wear these jeans and where they really come together. Everything from, doing yard work or doing things around your house. If you have to move furniture around or you have to do handiwork, they're perfectly comfortable. But you can wear them, getting your man spread on the subway, if that's your thing. So the Perfect Jean is great for all kinds of different environments, whether it's doing handiwork around the house or on the job or athletics. And we really hope you guys will go and check them out. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use the code HOUSE15 for 15% off. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code HOUSE15. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. So fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Jean.
Special operations, covert ops, espionage, the Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey folks, welcome to episode 334 of the Team House. I'm Jack Murphy, tonight with our guest, the author of the Houdini Club, Mir Bamanya. We're very happy to have him here on the show. I've known Mir for a few years now. We meet up maybe once a year for lunch. He's a 275 veteran and also has gone into work writing historical works about warfare, done some work in Hollywood, kind of all around doing interesting things. So I'm excited to talk about this book in particular that you have coming out now, which is about Derby Rangers, the original modern Rangers that fought in North Africa and through Italy and up into Germany. Is this book available now? Is it out yet, Mir?
It's coming out April 22nd.
Okay,
so
great.
What's that?
A month from now.
4 weeks, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, exactly. So a slight delay. It was delayed by about a week. But anyway, first of all, thanks for having me. And you guys have a great show. So
Thank you.
just so you know. Yes. And I don't say that lightly, So anyway.
Mir, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you grew up and ended up in Ranger Battalion yourself.
Okay, sure. It's going to take 5 hours, like I told you before. So I'll try to give you the Cliff Note version here. My dad was Iranian. He served in the Shah's army until sometime in the 60s. And my mom is German. And I grew up in Germany until I was maybe 15, 16. And then we all moved to California. So I'm basically a West Coast boy. Grew up during really great times in California in the 70s and 80s. My dad made me promise not to join the military while he was alive. He said something about Americans are crazy. They're always going to go to war. So, I dropped in and out of college when my dad was really sick. Eventually, I graduated, went to UC Berkeley, and got a degree in history. And then I enlisted. I wanted to go special forces. But at that time, before you were born, Jack, they only took prior service. So the recruiter the genius that he was, knew that I had read all these LERP books, and you had some great guests on long range patrollers. And he said Rangers, and I'm like, oh, awesome, 4-6 man team behind enemy lines, kind of a thing. Little did I know, it had transitioned into a line infantry unit, or light infantry unit. So anyway, I enlisted 275. I enlisted originally for 4 years, did basic AIT airborne RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program, all at Benning. I did RIP twice. I broke my ankle in the first RIP class, and they allowed me to stay at the head shed, where I in-processed a bunch of other guys coming in, and graduated my second RIP class with little notice, so I was not really super fit. Also got my teeth kicked in hand-to-hand combat. I was a bit too motivated. From there, I went to 275, and I think it was First Sergeant Klein at the time thought I was a tall 6'2" guy, very fit, and he said, "Machine gun, here, take it, go." So I joined Weapons Squad, Bravo Company 275, which was really great, very formative. But it was during the time of budget cuts, right? I mean, this was in the mid to late 80s. And we're a dozen plus years after Vietnam, so the military wasn't in super great standing at the time. And you kind of felt that when you went off base. But what's interesting? It was a good time period. I was 26 with a 4-year degree. I came in as a Spec 4, and I earned that. 2 RIP classes. I deserved the promotion. But anyway, so I went to 275, had my first Ranger School slot, but busted the ankle playing combat soccer, the one I had broken in the previous RIP class, in the first RIP class. So then they sent me to PLDC during block leave. And then they offered a program to people. It was called Green to Gold. And it was basically for enlisted swine to go and, end their contract, their active duty contract, sign up again for 8 years and go to ROTC. And so I did that. I took that option. So I spent 2 years at battalion. I was a machine gunner, and then they made me training NCO when they knew they were booting me down to Legland. And that was all good. I made good friends. I still talk to some guys. One of them became a battalion commander at 1st Bat, and the other one became JAG, worked with the regiment, and Special Operations Command as a lawyer. So I still stay in touch with these guys. Went to RTC in the Bay Area, San Francisco, was working on my master's, ruptured my thigh playing soccer, got kicked out of the military, medical discharge, but I didn't get any medical anything, VA benefits. I didn't really enlist for that either. So anyway, I got booted and did some civilian stuff, and tried to re-enlist for the first Gulf War, and they wouldn't clear me medically. So eventually I ended up going to Hollywood, having wonderful dreams of becoming a producer, making movies, hooked up with a bunch of ex-military guys, which was an interesting experience because, at that time there weren't a lot of combat vets around. So there were also a bunch of people who had like no real experience whatsoever, but claimed to be this, that, and the other. And it's, once you've been in a battalion, once you've been in any active duty military unit, you kind of get a feel for what, whether or not someone is legit or not. But Hollywood was interesting. The military wasn't really very liked, but, people were tech advisors, and I struggled through there, tried to be a producer, met some really great people, but Hollywood is a snake pit. It's not a great place, really. And ultimately, the interesting thing about moving to Los Angeles was I was on one of those early bulletin boards for Rangers and stuff. And one guy said, "Hey, look, there's this Ranger, an old timer living in LA. He's got all these photos." And prior to that, I'd done a little bit of research on Merrill's Marauders, things like that. I was interested in it after I left the battalion. So I'd already reached out back in the day when you did letters and things like that. So I had reached out to some Merrill's Marauders who'd been very good about sending me back their information. So I was interested in that theater for a little while. I go to LA, I hear about this old geezer called Phil Stern, famous photographer down in Hollywood, jazz, best friends with Jimmy Dean and, just John Wayne, all these Frank Sinatra. So he was a great old guy. So I went, I introduced myself, and I basically went and hung out with him maybe once every week, every 2 weeks for a number of years. And he had this amazing collection of photographs from Darby's Rangers that he had joined as a combat photographer, a few months after activation. So that's sort of how I got into the Darby Ranger thing. And from there, I'd been on the board of the 75th Ranger Regiment Association. So I'd go to some reunions. I'd go to the World War II Ranger Battalion Association reunions. I'd talk to Phil Stern a lot about Hollywood, military, whatever. So we became really good friends, and he introduced me to a lot of the Darby guys. And luckily for me, there were a ton of them in Southern California at the time. They're all dead now, but it's kind of sad, actually. But, it happens to all of us. And so I developed this affinity toward Darby's Rangers. And this started, I'd say, maybe in the early 90s. And so I'd been collecting things here and there, and I told Phil we needed to preserve his history, the images. He had, I think, 800 pictures on Darby.
Wow. Holy shit.
Darby's Rangers. Yeah, a lot of them. And he had thousands on jazz, like Sammy Davis Jr., Jimmy Dean. I mean, this guy was a heavy hitter. He was Delta Force of combat photographers. So he allowed me to scan in like 100, 150 of his images. Back then, I had a flatbed scanner. I was probably one of the first people that had one of those things. And so I kind of just developed that. I got to keep that. And then he said, hey, you should talk to this guy. So I would call that guy up, and they'd mail me things. And then the computers sort of started to take off. And some of the old timers got better at that, of course, and started emailing me things or sending me floppy disks. When I started writing this book, I had to find an old floppy disk to hook it up to an old computer to get some of that data that I had not saved. So that's sort of how Darby came about. And in Hollywood, I didn't really want to be a tech advisor, although I did tech advise. I started actually on a couple of small shows, and I was one of the early guys on Black Hawk Down. There's a whole story on Black Hawk Down, which is not a positive experience.
Tell us the story. Let's hear it, Mir.
I was persona non grata with the PAO at 75th. So what happened is I had a good friend of mine, 275 baby, also Tim Abel, great actor.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah. So Tim was also in the old guard. Anyway, Tim was good friends with the tech advisor for Bruckheimer. Jerry Bruckheimer, big producer in Hollywood, does all the big movies. He produced Black Hawk Down, among many other things. And the director was Ridley Scott. And the tech advisor for pretty much most of Bruckheimer's movies was Harry Humphreys, Navy SEAL. High-speed guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. He's one of those guys where you need to go drink with him, though, to be considered of value or to be trusted. I don't drink much, so. But anyway. So anyway, Tim introduced me to Harry, and they said Black Hawk Down is greenlit. It's not going to be done with Disney. It's going to be done with Sony. And they knew I was a Ranger. So I reached out to the Ranger community. Got lots of pictures from the guys who had been over there. I think it was Bravo 375. I think that was in Mogadishu. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those guys were really awesome, really great guys. They sent me pictures, whatever. I compiled a database, sent it to production, basically to Harry and all that stuff. By the way, I only got paid, I think, for about 2 weeks, and I did a lot of work on that fucking show. I read the first draft of Mark Bowden's adaptation of his own book, and I had met Mark prior to that. Really great guy, actually. I met him at the Chateau Marmont, where one of the Belushis died of a drug overdose, I think it was. But Mark was a great guy, very approachable. You could talk to him. He's knowledgeable. I think his book was 95% really accurate. for a civilian, right? I mean, you got to know a few things, but the regiment supported the book, so it was really an excellent book. I read his first draft. I thought it was okay, but what do I know? It was okay. In Hollywood, nobody knows what a good script is, by the way. Don't let them fool you.
The average person today is feeling the financial strain more than ever. Expenses are up, wages aren't keeping pace, and many people are finding it nearly impossible to make ends meet. With little left over for covering the basics, it's no surprise that many are resorting to credit cards just to get by, often carrying high balances and interest rates in the 20s and even 30s. If you're a homeowner and you're stuck in this cycle of mounting debt, you need to call my friends at American Financing. Their salary based mortgage consultants are saving homeowners an average of $800 a month, helping you put your hard earned money back where it belongs. Plus, if you act now, you might even be able to skip your next mortgage payment. There are no upfront fees, so it costs you nothing to find out how much you could save each month. It's time to break free of the stress of debt. Call American Financing today and take control of your financial future. 866-889-8010, 866-889-8010, americanfinancing.net/teamhouse.
But then Bruckheimer, in typical Hollywood fashion, hired somebody else, and I got to read that draft as well. I forgot now who wrote it. And I'm reading through it and I'm going, hey, this name, I heard something. So I check on it. It turns out one of the leads is a guy who's gets busted and goes to jail for, I want to say sexual assault, but probably rape of his daughter over a number of years. I forget his name and it doesn't matter. But anyway, he's featured in this script heavily.
I remember this being controversial, yeah.
Yeah, so I call Harry Humphreys. I'm like, you guys have to change this. You got to tell production this guy is going to go to jail soon. It wasn't confirmed yet. It was all hush hush. So they changed the script completely. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to get a lot of heat from one or two Rangers who are like, hey, you're using this to make yourself bigger and all that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm hardly getting paid, and all your names and all your work is credited and it's going to production. I don't know what to say. But anyway, one of the people I heard about a lot was Eversman, that he was a pretty nice guy, squared away, whatever, all that. So I made a very minor off the cuff remark to Harry. I said, maybe an Eversman might replace this kind of character. I have nothing to do with the script, this is my opinions. I'm throwing them out. And since I provided fortunes in terms of images from the Rangers and had put a database together, I guess I sort of was reputable, and I'd started liaising with the public affairs officer at the regiment at the time. And I said, hey, listen, off the record, I said, listen, this movie's going to get made. I'm sure they're going to reach out to you guys. So I'm just giving you a heads up as a former Bat Boy, because I thought I'd be cool. Anyway, so they made changes to the script. Whatever, for better or for worse, that they certainly removed that controversial Ranger, which was a wise thing to do. And I was involved in it. They brought a 375 guy on board who had been in Mogadishu, great guy. And eventually production reaches out to the PAO, with whom I'd been talking throughout the entire time. And all of a sudden, I get no return calls from that guy. Captain, I think it was his rank at the time, S5 shop maybe. Anyway, so I called half a dozen times. Meanwhile, I'm also working on We Were Soldiers Once and Young, doing some prep work there for the prop guys. Prop guys are the guys who manufacture things that are handled by actors on set. So, and I'm getting pissed. I'm like, I've done a lot of work here. I'm looking out for the regiment's interests. I put you in touch with production. Production is talking to you. Great. You could at least on occasion return my phone call, because I still thought I was going to be part of the whole thing. So he ignores me and I get mad. I write a letter, fax it to the colonel of the regiment, and basically saying, hey, listen, I'm not affiliated whatsoever. I've only done research. I'm not speaking on behalf of Sony, Bruckheimer, anybody, nobody, just Ranger Balmanyal, talking to Ranger, whoever colonel at the time it was. And I said, this is not how you should treat fellow Rangers. So anyway, I sent that fax in. A day later, I get a phone call. I'm driving in a truck with this Mexican dude, great guy. He's taking me out to all these Mexican joints in LA, like real food. And I get this call from the PAO. And he's like, what the hell are you doing, bombing? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, fuck you. Oops. I don't even know if I can swear on this
Nah,
thing.
it's okay.
I'm like, hey, get lost. I'm like, I called you half a dozen times, left you messages, whatever, and you're blowing me off. And he's like, I lost the job now because of you, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you should treat Rangers better. I thought that's what we do, right? Brotherhood and all that. Boom, end of story. Eventually, I get let go on the production of Black Hawk Down. It had nothing to do with that, I think. It was more about someone close to Harry Humphreys thought I was going to use this opportunity working on the film to harass the director and producer with my own projects, which I had accumulated over the years, which, by the way, Harry had asked me about. So they said, well, we can only have you work here for this and pay you for this. And then, we're not taking you to Morocco to film. And I'm like, fine.
There's
you
a
have
lot
a much
of
better
there's,
guy.
there's a lot of those like petty jealousies in that world from what I hear.
Yeah.
Like everyone's trying to fuck everyone else off of the job.
It's absolutely true. Tech advising is particularly brutal, but all of Hollywood is brutal. You got to remember, 1% of the people in Hollywood get 99% of the money. And then 99% of us are slugging it out in a death pit to get that 1%. So it's challenging, And I didn't want to be a tech advisor, so that it wasn't that important to me. It was just my buddy Tim Abel, Harry Humphreys is friends with him. Ranger book is going to be adapted. It's a good book. I liked it. So I'm like, okay, I'll help. I'll work. I wasn't getting anything out of that. The money was, very mediocre, quite frankly, and only for a few weeks. And I put a couple months into that. So, but it's a challenging environment. There is no real teamwork there, but there are some great people. Don't get me wrong. I still talk to one executive who's gone from being, an executive at a lower independent thing to being a big wig over at Disney now. I still talk to him. I still actually, oddly enough, have one project in development with a writer. It's like crazy. And I haven't been in Hollywood in like a decade, if not longer. So, but it's still lingering somewhere. But yeah, it's tough. So I was let go, which was okay. But then, oddly enough, I'm going to Fort Benning to do some research on Rangers. I'm going to back then the Donovan Technical Library, I think it was called. Maybe it's still called that. I don't remember. Is it even still called Benning? Anyway.
We're back to Benning. Benning is back. Okay. You can say that.
Okay. All right. So I go to the library for research, and I have a friend of mine who's going, I want to say through OCS at the time, ex-Bat Boy, Charlie 275. So it kind of worked for me. So I went down to Benning, and I see the PAO from the LA Army office, right? Because the US Army has a presence, public affairs for Hollywood in LA. And he's like, hey, Mir, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. I can't talk to you. You've been blacklisted. So the PAO at 75th, when he got replaced, was pissed and made sure I had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. And I'm like, whatever, petty, but learn your lesson. The lowest enlisted ranger in the civilian world also should be treated well, not just at the time, but also when you're out. You got to treat rangers right, I think, at least. So I was blacklisted there, but I worked on We Were Soldiers for a little while, and I wasn't not picked up on that because I wasn't the union guy, which is also perfectly fine. Again, I don't want to tech advise, but I worked on that a little bit, and my great credit on that film would be that I made sure that Bernard Fall's Hell in a Small Place was there, and The Bugle, because those were things that were in Hal Moore's book that they did not have in the script. So at least I contributed on that, was good. Anyway, fast forward, movie gets shot. I'm trying to produce, I'm acquiring projects left, right, and sideways, spending money I don't have. And, cold calling, like anything else. If you don't pick up the phone, nobody's going to do anything for you. And people don't do anything for you. You really got to earn everything. And there's a premiere. Big splash. Sony has a huge premiere. I think it was in Culver City. And I'm hearing this now from my buddy, who is the guy for the Marine Corps in the film office in LA. because I, oddly enough, believe it or not, I had acquired the rights to a book that he had adapted on just by fluke. It was Colder Than Hell, Chosen Reservoir, Marine Corps. I forgot the guy's name now. Owen, I think. Whatever. I had acquired it by pure luck, much like I had acquired with The Old Breed and all sorts of military historical books I had acquired because I wanted to be a producer. So I just bump into this Marine. I'm like, hey, I have this book. I want to know if the Marine Corps will support it. He's like, yeah, I have a script for it. So anyway, I became good friends with this guy. And he's like, I can get you into the premiere for Black Hawk Down if you want to. And I'm like, they're going to be pissed, right? And he goes, I don't care. We're the Marines. I'm like, hey, dude, great. He says, you have to go with one of my NCOs, though. I'm like, hey, I don't care. Perfect. So I got invited to go Black Hawk Down, courtesy of the United States Marine Corps, the men's department of the Navy, like they always like to say. Went and watched the movie, bumped into some Delta dudes that I had interviewed for some other project in Vegas. Bumped into, some producers and whatever, and watched the movie, and I was asked opinions, and I gave them that were not well received, and that was me on Black Hawk Down. But I think overall it was probably a good movie, and certainly technically it was a great looking film. And when the regiment supports something and the 160th supports something, you can't just buy that. So, and they only pay, in case people don't know, they only pay really about a dime per dollar. So really the taxpayer funds this more or less. Not something people want to hear, but but it was a great experience. Some really great people involved in production, and Hollywood is a tough thing. I think it's harder actually than selection or anything else. And I haven't been to selection. This is just, it's so small. Success rate is so tiny. And there's so many failures in Hollywood, and you really got to have money or contacts when you go there. The fact of putting in the time is very rare. It's really rare. So it was a hard thing. And I had some hard breaks, getting somebody saying, hey, we're going to make you an offer on Monday. Tuesday, they call and say, well, we've gone with this guy. Or me pitching with The Old Breed to DreamWorks several times when they were doing the Pacific. And I'm like, you got to have this book. You got to have this book. It's better than, Helmet for My Pillow, which is a very good book. But I still think with The Old Breed is probably one of the greatest memoirs, war memoirs I've ever read, along with Chris Cox, who you had on your show, by the way, Fire Force. That was probably in the top 10 for me as well. So I pitched DreamWorks a bunch of times, and they're like, no, we don't want it. Eventually, I let the option expire because, I'm not wealthy. And DreamWorks goes and picks it up and makes the Pacific based on it. So that was I think that one of the last things where I was like, I'm kind of done with this.
Yeah.
And some other people here and there. And then and I met someone, and she's Canadian, couldn't work in the US. So I decided to write books a little bit more, and we moved to Canada. And I know I'm ranting, but book writing came directly out of Black Hawk Down. So I never wanted to be a writer, oddly enough. Always wanted to be a producer in Hollywood. So I get fired, or not asked to go to Morocco. That's probably the better way to say it. It was all done very politely. And I have all these pictures. I have all this research. I've even talked to 10th Mountain medics. I'm like talking to everybody, even faxed the Pakistani embassy, whatever. I'm doing all this research for the movie, and I have all this stuff. So I just reached out to a British military publisher, and they said, oh, sure. Why don't you write us an article on, whatever, Black Hawk Down type thing for our magazine? I write it. It doesn't get published. The magazine goes under. But then they're like, why didn't you write a smaller book or something like that? So I write a 30,000 word book, which is like 64, 80 pages, something like that, on Rangers. And it kind of started like that. But I never took it seriously because I was still trying to become a producer. So I'd only write on occasion. And I never really promoted myself. It was always about preserving the history of the guy on the ground. That has always been what's interesting to me. And I guess it's because, you're a maggot carrying a machine gun up and down these stupid fucking hills in Fort Lewis, getting wet in a Nisqually and, people yelling all day long. And so I've always been fascinated by the grunt. It's always been interesting to me. All the LERP books, all the World War II books. Never once read one about a pilot or the Navy. It's always been like the Marine, the dog face, whatever, the SEAL, even frogman, whatever. I've always been interested in that. And so those are sort of the books I wrote. And, just because I sort of had been in the military, I had a little bit of reach, a little bit of contact. And being able to say, even though I was a tabless ranger, that still carries a lot of weight with a lot of people. So I sort of wrote books, but never seriously. I've only been really call it a serious book author with Run to the Sound of the Guns. You had Nick Moore on your channel.
Yeah, thanks to
I
you.
think that's when I was like, yeah, that's sort of when I started to say, no, I'm going to do this. I've completely dropped out of Hollywood. Darby, I've been accumulating Darby Ranger stuff forever. And I'm reading some of these things. I've talked to these old timers, and I've read, of course, whatever they have had, like Jim Altieri's The Spearheaders, which is his memoir about him enlisting, going through Derby, and being one of the originals from the days of Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland, to training at Achnacarry Castle in Scotland, to North Africa, Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, Last Battle Cisterna. So I'm reading his books, I'm talking to him, I visit him, and I've just been accumulating things here, there, and the other. And then my agent, Alex Shane, he's always annoying me because he's like, you can't be a fiction writer, Mir, because you're only a nonfiction writer. And I had handed him a novel, and he's like, this is everything I hate. So, but he has it out right now, and I have high hopes for it. But
I love that you and I both get to have these arguments with Alex.
Yeah, so you've had a far more interesting career path, actually. But anyway, so my stuff was basically 2 years battalion after a 4-year degree, Hollywood, Canadian girlfriend, moved to Canada, still did Hollywood-related stuff. Ghost wrote, by the way. I made money ghostwriting for some A-listers in Hollywood, feature and TV pilot. So that was okay, but I was running out of money. Because, book authors don't make money unless you're maybe Jack Carr or your good buddy Mark Graney, who's funny, actually. He and I have a lot in common. He went to Cologne. I grew up in Germany. He plays soccer. I love soccer. We were both cripples. So,
yeah.
Anyway, but he's a successful writer.
Yeah, I love Mark.
Yeah, so he was great. I just watched that interview again with him. So, and I see him like I see you, like once a year, here and there, so sometimes twice a year. But he didn't write a blurb for my World War II Houdini Club book because my publisher was way too late to contact him. So, but anyway, so Alec, our agent said, you suck. Novels, I can't sell them, especially what you're writing. Why don't you focus on nonfiction? And I'm thinking, and I had been invited to this U.S. Ranger Museum in Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland, several times through a friend of mine, actually from Weapons Squad at 275, who became a JAG lawyer. He had gone there on a vacation, said, hey, Mir, you should go check this out. So I reached out to them, and they're like, hey, we're having this remodel of our small U.S. Ranger Museum in Northern Ireland. Do you have material? So I, of course, had a lot of stuff from Phil Stern, images. I had the onion skins to Jim Altieri's Spearheaders book because I inherited all that stuff when he died. So I sent him all that stuff. They invited me, really cool people. So I've been going like 2 or 3 times now. I'm going again this year. That's Carrickfergus. So I kind of then followed Darby's Rangers much more just because of that. And I think the first time I went to that museum was 2017. And those people, let me tell you, are dedicated to preserving American World War II history there.
That's awesome.
They're really incredible people. And they are not, they're not wealthy. These are, austerity in the UK and all that stuff. So, but they do a great job. They remodeled this small cottage with all sorts of World War II Derby Ranger stuff, some modern stuff. It was really great. And so I kind of got more into it, and I'm looking at all the stuff I have in my basement, and I probably have, I don't even know what, thousands thousands of pages, of stuff I accumulated going to the library. Back in the day at Benning, at the Donovan thing, the librarians were super cool. They'd get me the microfiche of Darby's Rangers after action reports, of fucking morning reports. And, in your microfiche, you try Xeroxing that stuff. I mean, and I'm like, I need at least 100, maybe 500 pages. They're like, oh, they're rolling their eyes in the back of the head, because they're not going to charge me for it. And so I have all this stuff. I have thousands of pages. I have a couple books that aren't published by Jim Altieri. So I have all this stuff. I have all these conversations with these old timers. They've sent me stuff. And I always felt like, book writing was never about making money, really. It was just sort of opportunistic to a degree, like Chris Osmond, Navy SEALs, like, hey, maybe we should write a book. So I write a book. Then Tim puts me in touch with Nick Moore. So I've never really followed it per se. It's just now that I'm doing it. So fast forward anyway, Alec is like, you're a loser, can't sell your book, I'm sure, but I'll take it out. Come up with something nonfiction. And I'm thinking about things. And I'm like, it only makes sense to do something on Darby because I like the guys. I hate some of them. But, it's like the military. There's a love-hate relationship with a lot of things. But mostly they've been really great guys. And mostly there are no histories out on Darby's Rangers.
Hey guys, I want to take a moment to tell you about tonight's sponsor for the show, which is Ridge Wallets. I've been using this for about 6 months now. Really enjoy it. This wallet is made out of carbon fiber, titanium, and steel, and it really holds up and lasts. So, in the past, I carried a leather wallet. It's made by, professional, has a small shop, and does leather work. And I mean, it was a nice wallet, and I really loved it. But the problem with those wallets is they get thicker and thicker and thicker, and we end up carrying around something that's like, a little phone book in the back of our pocket after a while. And that leads to problems with your posture and everything else. So what I like about the Ridge wallet, it's really a minimalist design. So most of us are using cards these days, so it can hold all of your cards in here inside these elastic pieces that you can press out. And then there's a clip on the back. You can, I use it to clip money in when I do use dollars, can clip them in there. They have over 50 colors and styles, so it's not just functional. You can personalize it a bit as well. They have some that feature your favorite NFL teams and so forth. Losing your wallet is also pretty crappy. I've had that happen to me as well. Actually, that wallet, the leather wallet I was telling you about, I lost it on the subway. So there's that. But Ridge has an answer for that, Ridge AirTag attachment. And with that, you'll always know exactly where your wallet is before panic mode kicks in, all right? Ridge isn't just about wallets. They create premium everyday carry essentials like key cases, suitcases, and rings, all built with the same sleek, durable design. So right now, Ridge is having their once-a-year anniversary sale. Get up to 40% off at ridge.com/house. Just head to ridge.com/house to see their biggest sale of the year. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them our show sent you. So guys, please go and check out Ridge Wallets. This also makes a great gift. My girlfriend has one of these. My stepfather has one of these. So I've given them away too. I have one of them. And our producer, Dimitri, has one. So please go and check out Ridge Wallets.
You've had Robert Black, who was a Ranger himself and very supportive. I mean, the guy's like 2,000 years old. I called him 2 years ago, maybe it was. I forget now when. And he's like, I'm losing my mind, but, I can't remember things. But yes, but go, you can use anything I have. If you talk to the people over here, if you talk to Carlisle Barracks, you absolutely have my permission to use whatever you want, all that stuff. So there were really great people out there. And Bob Black, was a former Ranger, served in Vietnam, I think Korea. And he had written the only books really on Darby Rangers. He wrote a book called
I read his memoir, which was very good.
Ranger Born. Mm-hmm.
And I believe he wrote a book about Rangers in Korea that I read also.
He did, yeah, Rangers in Korea, very good. And particularly what I was interested in at the time was the 2nd Airborne Ranger Company, the All Blacks.
Yeah.
All black company, really great stuff actually. And I actually developed a show on that, never got it picked up, although I understand now somebody's doing it or at least in development. So Bob has been instrumental. Bob wrote his own stuff. Bob wrote on, the history of Rangers. He wrote World War II Rangers, Rangers in World War II, Rangers in Korean War, and then he wrote in 2009 a book called Ranger Force, which is great. Got a few small mistakes in there, but I think there are typos mostly, like West instead of East, stuff like that. And he certainly didn't put in some things that would probably shed a negative light on Rangers. I think that's one of the problems of being a historian in that field. When you're a ranger yourself, you're close to rangers, you can't necessarily write about certain things that might bring some heat back to you. So Altieri did the same thing. I love Jim Altieri, great American patriot, and I'm not the super patriotic guy, I don't wave the flag or anything, but he was, and he never, ever, ever, ever wrote anything negative about any Rangers that he knew that he served with, anything. It was always fairly positive, right? And I'm not blaming him. I'm simply saying in the literature of Darby's Rangers, you genuinely have one solid book that's a history book, and that's Bob Black's Ranger Force. And then you have a bunch of memoirs and other things, hard to get, really interesting stuff. And then I have a bunch of letters, phone conversations, and these weren't interviews, because I've noticed over the years, when you sit with pen and paper or a laptop or a recorder and you talk to the guys, it's a different thing than when you just shoot the shit.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is memory more for me than it is about, on this date he said this to me, right? Like one guy said about Phil Stern, he said, Phil's a great guy, we all loved him, but he was not a ranger. He didn't go through the training. He was just a camera guy. Yeah, fair enough. Still, he got wounded badly in North Africa, almost got killed. So while with the 1st Ranger Battalion. So you have stuff like that. And, you have people who literally just murdered civilians. I put that in the book because I find that is a more historically accurate and proper thing to do. And I'm not writing some kind of expose journalistic something. This is a history book. And there's a guy I'm particularly interested in, Charles Schunstrom, who was the youngest officer, one of the first 29 officers selected by Darby personally. And he had been previously had been an enlisted swine in Hawaii, went to OCS. And that guy, he was a killer. He was a murderer. I mean, he was the guy who will win you wars. This is the guy. And, he would be cutting throats late at night behind enemy lines. He'd lead bayonet charges with I think it was Charlie Company, one of the platoons, maybe 1st, 2nd platoon in North Africa. And they would go in there with their 16-inch long bayonets and fucking just kill the Italians that they overran. I mean, it's just nasty stuff, And people, how often do we have that really? It's rare to have bayonet charges, right? It's rare to have sentry removal by knife. I mean, I knew a guy who was a Vietnam LERP. You probably have heard of him, Tadina, Patrick Tadina.
Yeah.
60 months in Vietnam, a good friend of mine. I actually have his film rights, and I always have thought about writing a book, but I just have never gotten around to it. Much loved by everybody. He's the only guy I know, until, of course, your era, modern war, I don't know, but who's actually done sentry removal using a .22 caliber, an NVA guy when they were in a hospital in the jungles.
I hope you'll follow through with that at some point, Mir, because when Mr. Tadina passed away, I was actually going to work on like an article, like a biographical piece, 5,000 words about. And it just kind of fell through for various reasons, like people weren't as communicative as I would have liked. But I think his story deserves to be told, and I hope you'll be the one to do it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's very funny. I was at a dentist recently. Yes, Rangers do get dental work done on occasion. We're not supermen, especially when you get your teeth kicked in when you're stupid. But and I had a Filipino dental assistant. And we're just talking, whatever, and he asked me what I was doing. I was telling him I'm writing a book, and he said, and I always ask people where they're from, usually cab drivers, because, I'm half brown. At least my father was. I'm all Northern European, but I always ask people, to kind of see what's going on, what the vibe is. And then he said, he's Filipino. I said, I know a great Hawaiian Filipino guy. And I mentioned to Dina. He goes, you know what? We have a statue dedicated to him in this one village somewhere, wherever it was. Small world, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, Tadina was outstanding. I think he personally killed 113 people hand to hand, within small arms, and probably is responsible for the death of thousands. I'm not even kidding you on that. And I mean, you spend 60 months in the jungle consecutively, and you're dragged out to go bury your brother who got killed in Vietnam, and he escapes being captured by the MPs trying to prevent him from going from Hawaii back to Vietnam. He escapes and goes back to Vietnam. And every one of his guys that I talked with at reunions loved him. And he never got anybody wounded, never got anybody killed. He's the only one who ever got wounded.
Wow.
Anyway, so speaking of century, we're going to Vietnam, we're World War II, but Sundstrom and even Roy Murray, who was one of the first officers and became the 4th Derby Ranger Battalion commander, the only one 4th Battalion ever had, he too would go with knife, Fairbairn Sykes knife, and pistol in hand on these nighttime raids. And they'd be shooting and stabbing and cutting throats. And I mean, this is some brutal stuff, these nighttime raids, This is not ambush like I'm accustomed to in peacetime, L-shaped ambush, maybe some claymores, which are awesome, but it's nothing like that. This was really hardcore stuff, and these are young guys, so it's been interesting. So Derby, I got reinvigorated by my visit to the museum. I helped the museum a lot. They have been fantastic about preserving our history there. They even have a huge black rock, which we call the Mecca, where every ranger should at one time go to see it. It's really awesome. And it's built at the former Sunnylands camp where the rangers assembled and trained, where they're first trained before they went to Commando Training Depot. So anyway, so the point is, Darby, was a West Pointer artillery guy, actually quite experienced, musically very inclined, by the way. There's some great stories during the war when they're in Italy and they've just captured whatever it is, German-occupied town. They kicked all the Nazis and fascists out. And they're having a big party, the officers, right, at some villa or something, and they're all drunk. And one of the officers, Herman Dammer, who was the executive officer to Darby, right-hand man, eventually commands 3rd Battalion, they're all getting drunk singing German songs because Herman Dammer's German ancestry. And then Darby would go, "Ach, du Lieber," at the end of the song, right? And there are MPs out on the street. They're thinking Germans are still in this town. So they're coming in, barging in with guns and everything like that. I mean, there's some great stories. I put that in the book just because it's so absurd when you think about it, singing German songs in an Italian town after you've killed the Germans and driven them out of there. But anyway, so we're in Ireland, 1942. Marshall is tasked with reforming, modernizing the army because everybody knows we're going to go to war. I mean, we've probably known we're going to go to war since the mid to late 30s. We're mobilizing, we're federalizing National Guard units. And Darby is on staff in Northern Ireland with some 30,000 guys that we have over there, and he's bored. He literally is hating it. He wants to be in a command of a tactical unit. He wants to go out and go to war, like we all did. We all prayed for war, at least we did in my time. With you guys, it's probably a little bit different because you actually went and did some things. But so eventually he's torturing his boss, and there's talk of forming this ranger unit based along the commando lines. It's not called a ranger unit at the time. And Truscott, back then was a colonel, becomes, of course, a general, very famous general. And he's tasked with creating this commandos type unit like the Brits have. And the British have been raiding, European shores, trying to restore morale back home because the Germans have been kicking ass up and down every front. They've been winning, basically. So the Americans decide they're going to do one too. And it's going to be a commando unit modeled after the Brits, so small because they have to fit in these landing crafts. So it's like half size, if not smaller, than a regular American infantry battalion. So it's really small. And Darby, because he's a pest, I think, and because he has some experience, gets the job. And it probably was the best decision they made. He goes and interviews a bunch of officers that are all in Northern Ireland, Belfast, Carrickfergus. He interviews them all, handpicks 29 guys. And there's people like Herman Dammer, whom I've mentioned, German guy. He was supposedly really the tactical genius of the Ranger Battalion at the time. Like, he came up with some real innovative stuff. Then he brought on Roy Murray, who was also a pilot, and a deacon and a star athlete, cross-country guy, really a womanizer, a golfer, He brings all these officers on board, including Schunstrom, some really great names. And I have them in my book. I don't want to say too much about them. People should read on these guys because you don't hear much about them ultimately. And so he has 29 officers. They go break up into smaller boards where they interview volunteers. And so they have a process like, could you kill someone? Could you kill someone with a knife? How do you feel? You're Italian. Aren't you Italian? Aren't your parents Italian? Could you kill an Italian? You're German. Could you kill a German? All these kinds of questions. And so they select a bunch of people, like 500 some odd guys. They assemble them in Carrickfergus, and they interview some of these people at an old castle, a 10th century castle that's at Carrickfergus. I mean, can you imagine? You're some kid from Oklahoma, you're 18 maybe 17, maybe 19, and you go and get interviewed in this castle. You've probably never seen anything past maybe 18th century, some wooden shack. So anyway, it's cool stuff. So they put a bunch of guys together. They have to be between 1735, I think. They can't have any sort of health issues, stuff like that. And they're really looking for unique guys. They're looking for hunters, but they're also looking for mechanics. They're looking for people who've worked on heavy equipment, radios, because they're building this elite commando unit that needs all this sort of diversity. So they have 500 guys. They all assemble at Sunnylands. They get their equipment. They get into some kind of shape, formation. They start running, doing all the things that we started to do to get them in shape. They lose a bunch of guys. They bring aboard more guys. So now they have it's under 500 guys. They go to Scotland, to Achnacarry Castle, where there's a British commando training thing. They go through really the things that we ended up doing at Ranger Indoctrination Program or subsequently Ranger School. They really developed all of that as the 1st Ranger Battalion, those standards. How fast can you road march, basically? Bayonet assaults, rope, cargo nets, all this stuff. I mean, this is our history of training literally came from these guys. They even did house-to-house training, in an abandoned factory and somewhere in, I think, Scotland. And they did a lot of amphibious assaults because that was going to be their job, like D-Day, right? We're going to go land. We'll be the first people in there. We're going to practice taking out these large batteries that are going to hammer the Allied fleet. So they spent I want to say it was a month in Carrickfergus getting in shape, becoming Americans, being a unit that wouldn't embarrass themselves. They go to this British Commando training depot in Scotland. In the north of Scotland, I've been there. They've got a great commando memorial there. And, they really mold a great unit. And some of those guys get deployed to Dieppe, and only like 12 out of 50 land. I think 3 get killed as strangers, basically, with people they didn't even know. Only a few Rangers trained with some of them. And there's some great stories about Dieppe, actually. I cover that in some detail in there. And then they go back and they finish their training. And of course, what has happened, like any elite unit, you have only 50, like 10% of your guys have gone over to a combat mission, of which only about 20% actually landed. The rest didn't land. They got their, landing craft shot out underneath them and stuff, and thousands of Canadians got butchered. And that's Dieppe in 1942. But they go back to the UK, they finish their training, they prepare some real hardcore training to land in North Africa. So now what do you have? You have a unit that has been bloodied a little bit. And the original intent of the 1st Ranger Battalion was simply to be bloodied learn how to be war fighters, really, in this sort of special kind of training. And then they were supposed to be split up and sent to their regular units, like they do with Ranger School grads, right? They send them back to the regular Army to kind of elevate and teach some of them. But that didn't happen. So they go to North Africa. I don't know why it didn't happen. They go to North Africa. They land in Algeria. They do a night raid, seizing batteries, landing in the harbor. Some really great shit. They take their first casualties there. The other Allied troops are having problems. So, there's a request, I want to say by Terry Ellen, maybe it was, who was a great combat commander of the 1st Infantry Division eventually. Maybe it was him, could have been somebody else. But anyway, asking for, a Ranger company because they have a great reputation. They do a great job. And then the rest of the campaign is very short in Algeria. Like, I don't know, call it a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe, with mopping up operations. They take a few casualties, but they do a great job. And then what do they become? They become a dog and pony unit for hire to show how to do amphibious assaults. That didn't go over too well. 20% of the unit quits, more or less, or gets fired out. They have also desertion. Lots of hookers, lots of thievery, things like that. Things kind of fall apart a little bit, you're not in peacetime, but you're in a war zone, not doing anything. So they get replacements eventually. And so now you can look at it. You have 500 originals. Now you're down to under 400. Replacements come in. So there's that tier system that's starting to form. So they train these 100 new guys. Then they go to Tunisia, Battle of the Kasserine Pass. There are things they need to do. They do these incredible night raids. I mean, really phenomenal stuff behind enemy lines, 12 miles up and down this rugged mountain. It's incredible stuff when you think about it. Late at night, you're moving companies through enemy-held territories to hit something. And they do that twice, extremely successful at El Ghoutar and Sinet Station. And that's where we have people like Schunstrom and others. I'm not just talking about Schunstrom, like Roy Murray, who's a company commander with his fucking commando knife and pistol, goes and drives, I think, his commando blade into an Italian, Bersaglieri, I think, one of the elite mountain troop Italians, and snaps off the tip of his knife. I mean, that's how hard he drove it into the guy. I mean, there's stuff like that. And there are enlisted guys who've gotten promoted who are now officers who are also only leading with knives and pistols, right? And then you've got Schunstrom, who's a young lieutenant, and his platoon within Charlie Company was really known as a killer platoon. They didn't take prisoners at all, not whatsoever, none. And they would lead these insane bayonet charges across a pass into machine gun fire. And I can't even imagine, driving that long bayonet into some Italian in the middle of the night, screaming at the top of your lungs, And the funny thing about one of those raids is forever I'm reading this account written by another journalist. I'm reading this account. I'm like, bugle call? They're blowing the bugle to charge. I'm like, this is like China in the Korean War, And it turns out it was Darby. It turns out Darby, as the raid commenced, the actual, not to the approach, but the actual raid, he blew a bugle from his position back behind the line. And it's just insane. And they do an amazing job, black-faced, and in one they only wore commando knit caps. They didn't wear helmets because they didn't want to make noise. No heavy weapons, nothing, So they're a very mobile unit led by some hard chargers, exceptional training. And the Derby Rangers have always said, most of the accounts I've read is about how great the British were at teaching and doing bayonet assaults during the Second World War. They called it the meat. I think one ranger called it the meat. And when hate takes command, they have that bayonet and just go crazy. But some of the rangers said that the British were the worst shots they'd ever worked with, which is funny because in some of the reports from the training depot with the British commandos, the instructors were talking about how bad the Derby Rangers were at shooting. So they obviously had gotten incredibly good at it toward the early part of the war. So anyway, they do a great job in North Africa. The campaign is basically over. The Germans have been crushed. It's like a Stalingrad for them, but people don't know that. They've taken hundreds of thousands of casualties, same with the Italians. And so the Rangers have developed this amazing reputation for nighttime ops, close quarter battle, just insane night marches, 2 raids behind enemy lines. And Hire decides they need more. So they create the 3rd and 4th Ranger Battalion in Nemours, Algeria. And what they do is they split up the old timers. So they take 2 companies per battalion, integrate them. Well, some stay with 1st Battalion, and they train up new recruits. And you get some combat veterans, but not that many, but you get some, and they train them. They have a lot of time to train. So the training, I think, is quite good. And now they're being led and trained by combat experienced Derby Ranger veterans. And I think Dammer gets the 3rd Battalion. Murray becomes 4th Ranger Battalion commander. Darby is still 1st Ranger Battalion commander, but there's no regimental headquarters, unlike what we got in the 80s when we got the regimental headquarters for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Ranger Battalion. Darby didn't get that because it was still a provisional unit. It was always supposed to be broken up. But they didn't do that. So they trained 1st, 3rd, and 4th Battalion for the invasion of Sicily. And that was a brutal, brutal thing for Darby's Rangers. So they get divided up. 1st and 4th go into Gela, and I've been to all these places in Sicily. It's humbling when you look at the terrain. As a historian, when you look at the terrain and you're kind of like, you're like 100 meters away from towns, you wouldn't want to land there with your landing craft exposed to all that fire. But so they go into Gela, Sicily, the 1st and 4th, and the 3rd goes off to the left a little bit, the western part of Sicily, to invade over there. And the 1st and 4th get hammered on the beaches. Minefields, they take a lot of casualties for Rangers, and it's a small group, this is not large. These are not large battalions. So they step on mines, people get killed, but they go, 2 or 3 Rangers climb up a seawall and knock out 12 pillboxes in a row, kick in the door, throw in a grenade, hose it down, whatever, however they did it. They did it several ways. And they would come and they seize the town, push to the edge of it. And, now it's daylight. There are a lot of dead civilians, a lot of dead Italian defenders who put up, actually, considering how poorly equipped they were, they put up a pretty stiff fight. And the Germans weren't involved in that. They actually had abandoned the Italians at that time. They really fucked them. But the Rangers did great work in Gela, got there, captured all the key points they needed to capture for follow-on forces, and then they get hit by counterattacks, Italian counterattacks, with little tankettes. They're called R-35, so it's a small machine, 37 millimeter guns, I think, but they're still tanks. And there's some nasty hand-to-hand in there, throwing TNT blocks, bazookas. Darby and Schunstrom actually knock out a tank with a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. Darby goes and climbs up on one and throws a thermite grenade on it. So there's really some nasty hand-to-hand stuff going on, and it's real close. And then the Germans are attacking to the east, hitting the other Allied forces that are landing there. So it's a close-run thing for a while, but the Rangers hold tough, seized all their objectives, everything, despite their casualties. And 3rd Ranger Battalion to their left did their job very well, landed at some amazing, bizarre rock formation beaches with hilltops. And you're thinking, when you're up there on the hilltops looking down, you're like, if you guys didn't come here at night, and if somebody had discovered you, you'd be in a world of hurt there. But they landed, they took a few casualties here and there, knocked out pillboxes, of course, the real stuff they'd been training for. And they seized these port towns really for subsequent Allied landing craft to come in and drop off more troops and things like that. So it was pretty, it was really, I think, North Africa was awesome for the 1st Ranger Battalion. And Sicily was really demonstrated to everybody how truly excellent they were as a fighting unit. An interesting sideshow, is that there were orders published that basically said, not necessarily addressed to the Rangers, but it was within Ranger files, that if you steal from them, you'll be court-martialed. If you rape, you'll be court-martialed, and there'll be death sentences issued. So there are a lot of things that had happened in North Africa they tried to avoid in Sicily. In North Africa, for example, Schunstrom, they always thought the Arabs were playing both sides. So one instance, the Rangers were deploying to go somewhere on a patrol, and Schunstrom saw an Arab looking out a window. He pulled out his 45 and just killed the guy. Another time when they were coming back from the Kasserine Pass, going to Nemours to basically create the 3rd and 4th Ranger battalions, a lot of Rangers in the train got into a fight with one another. Schunstrom's platoon was involved in it, and they threw hand grenades at each other in these wagons. Can you imagine hand grenades against your fellow Rangers in these wagon trains? I mean, it's insane. And other Rangers were shooting wild farm animals that Arab villagers had along these rail tracks. And the interesting thing is, you read some memoirs or some letters, and there are some farm boys who are really pissed about that, right? Because they were farmers. They knew how hard it is to raise these animals, to deal with that. That's how you make your livelihood, and others didn't give a shit. So there was always this kind of stuff with the Rangers as well, right? Anyway, they're in Sicily, and they've done a great job. And of course, there's a lot of looting, but they discovered that the Sicilians are just as poor as the North Africans. So there wasn't that much to steal. I read that a bunch of times, which was quite amusing. And then, the rest of the time in Sicily was really not a lot. It was mostly handling the mass prisoners, and that was really ugly. And there was one account where one Ranger captain came with his platoon, and they were being mobbed by starving Italians because they had no food, no water. The transportation system for the Allies wasn't in place yet. And they just opened up fire, emptying magazines into these Italian POWs. And I think that was Schunstrom. But others, elements of the 3rd Ranger Battalion, accompanied Patton, going to the north and then to the east along the mountains to cover his flank as he was driving toward Messina, which is on the northeast corner, the closest point to cross into mainland Italy. So the Rangers did a lot of muleteer action, like you guys eventually did in Afghanistan. Also, Merrill's Marauders, of course, did in World War II. And every mule they had died, got killed in the mountains. That should tell you something about the mountain ranges there. And it was just really fascinating. They also seized mountain fortresses. I went to a couple, and you're just looking at Sicily, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And you're looking at these old medieval towns, and you're looking at Germans were in there, and Schunstrom led the attack, and this other lieutenant was doing the covering thing, and they had to climb these hills, these mountains, I mean, in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm like, I don't think I could have done that. We climbed some things in Fort Lewis, and I was cussing up the storm. I don't know what that'd be like over there, but some really incredible stuff. I will say Darby's Rangers did phenomenal work in Sicily and North Africa. Really great. They took casualties, of course, and one of the greatest killers didn't kill people, but was malaria that they got really in Sicily. That really killed the unit a lot. They really lost a lot of people. A lot of people suffered from malaria. And of course, you have attrition. Rangers throughout from North Africa all the way to Sicily get relieved. A, because they failed to meet the standard. B, because they got injuries they can't come back from. I mean, very typical modern day Ranger stuff. Or people were exhausted. You had battle shock, combat fatigue, things like that. Others went back to the States and trained some of the Rangers. I think it was in Florida, maybe, the 2nd and 5th Ranger battalions. Some of them went there. So in any event, the plan is now to land on mainland Italy. We're still here, in 1943. And, D-Day that we all know about, the great glory of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, 1944, Normandy, that's still a long time away. So the Allied planners have decided Sicily is like our aircraft carrier. From here, we can bomb anybody we want with aircraft. And we need to land on mainland Italy. And so foolishly, they did that. And so the Ranger battalions, instead of having 2 months, 3 months to recruit, train, are only given something like 3 weeks. And meanwhile, of course, what a lot of people don't know, the U.S. military has a recruitment problem during the war. You can't just get as many people as you want at any given time, although it eventually alleviates. But there's a real shortage of guys. So in any event, they train up. They have a headquarters in Sicily. They train up. They refit, get all the battalions to some reasonable shape and numbers, and they go lead part of the Allied invasion into mainland Italy, which is north of Salerno. They did not land at Salerno, and they land at the Amalfi Coast, which is today a very beautiful bioceramics here, wonderful vineyards everywhere and farm country. And I went there, and my wife did all the travel booking, and we drove all over Sicily. By the way, if you drive in Sicily, get insurance, which we did. The roads and the drivers, and we were on some mule tracks. Let me tell you, I'm surprised the car lasted. But so we land in mainland Italy, my wife and I do, and we go to this hotel in Maori, which is part of the most, we'll call it southern part of the Amalfi Coast. And we go to this nice hotel. It's right next to the main strip. It's a very small town. It's a coastal town. And we're checking in and we're coming back out. My wife goes, "Hey, man, look over there." And I'd walked by this World War II memorial that had an Italian soldier, I think it was, dying, very, very artsy, modern kind of thing. And behind it were a bunch of Ranger plaques of, this is the first town liberated, whatever. No, that wasn't Maori. That wasn't Jela. But in Maori, there were Ranger plaques that said 1st, 3rd, and 4th Ranger Battalions. Men came here and freed Italy or something like that. So my wife spotted that. And so we spent a considerable amount of time talking to Italians. My wife speaks Pidgin Italian. I went and checked out all the key and not so key battle actions, went up the coast because 4th Ranger Battalion went up the coast. 1st and 3rd did other things, but ultimately the main things to remember about mainland Italy is we, the Derby's Rangers, landed at Maori, took over smaller villages north, hooked up with the British commandos south, and then they had to take this vast mountain. You're literally 100 yards away from this incredible 1,000,000-foot-high mountain range. And there's a pass that runs through it called the Chionzi Pass. And that's where a lot of people start to hate Schönstrom. Lots of Rangers start to hate Schönstrom. So the goal for the Rangers is to seize these coastal villages, get up on top of these mountain ranges, kick the Germans off, because Italy had surrendered in the meanwhile during Sicily. So a few Italians were still fighting. Some didn't know there was peace, but others were fascists. But it's mostly German opposition. And we're talking veterans from Sicily that had escaped in North Africa. We're not talking 18, 16-year-old little Nazis, you're talking hardcore veterans, some. So the job for the Rangers is to seize these mountain ranges, control them, call in fire from the Navy support. And the Rangers, in the meanwhile, had created something like mobile 75mm artillery on half tracks. So they had 4 of those. 2 of them went north at the Amalfi Coast and 2 went up to the Chionzi Pass under Schönstrom. And so what he would do is he'd be undercover and they'd look and, whatever, use their binos to locate German positions. They fire down and then start an artillery duel. And then, of course, the half tracks would back up to get out of harm's way. And the line dogs, the Rangers, who were all dug in these mountain crevices, took all the heavy fire, right? But then, of course, what happens is the Germans expose themselves. Darby and his headquarters guys call in all this fire and destroy the Germans like massively. It's amazing casualties that they cause on the Germans by Schönstrom doing exactly that. And Rangers are pissed, because he's exposing them to all this artillery fire, and that's a man killer. This is not small arms. This is like real man-killing stuff. So they do a very, very good job there. They secure the peninsula. The Rangers do mostly. They get some reinforcements because they really are getting ground down. It's mountain warfare. And they do a great job, and Salerno gets stuck, for a while, and they have their own problems in there, but Eventually, the Rangers get pulled off the line and are allowed to go to, I think it is Naples, to recover, refit, get people in, train up a little bit. And that's where the Ranger officers are singing Nazi songs, German songs, with Darby chiming in, Ach du Lieber. And the MPs, I think from a paratroop unit, actually came in and they all got into it or something. But it was quite something, I think. And the usage there of the Rangers, you might say it wasn't their job because it was kind of like line infantry. But, they'd been training to do mountain warfare. They obviously did a great job. They were a small unit. So the Rangers did their job. They seized these little ports, took the mountaintops, rained hell onto the Nazis, and the rest of the Allies did their job eventually after much suffering. And they're still stuck a little bit in the boot of Italy. And the Rangers then get deployed to what's become known as the Winter Line. And they have to go up all these mountain ranges on their drive up north. And they're like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 successive German defensive lines. And it's brutal. It's brutal. And, you have malaria kicking in, never mind the killed, the wounded, the exhausted. You have a lot of battle fatigue. The Germans are hammering you with mortars, 88s, direct field artillery pieces firing point blank at you. And it's grinding. It's grinding everybody. It's not just the Rangers, right? But the Rangers here, I feel, are more deployed and stretched thin, don't have the reinforcements. They don't have the necessary support that a regular, I think, infantry battalion would have, who have their own trucks, who have this, who have that, have the other. And, they get ground out a little bit. And eventually they're, of course, pulled off the line. The Allied thinkers, being, I don't think, the greatest people on the planet or the smartest, decide that we're stuck here on these winter lines. We're getting ground up. We're going to, circumvent. We're going to pass around this by doing another amphibious landing. Now think about it. Rangers, not all, but most Rangers, or a lot of Rangers, have participated in the landings at Dieppe, France. First one. To be fair, only a dozen landed, but 40 of them got shell shock from seeing thousands getting killed. Then they did an amphibious landing in North Africa. They did amphibious landings in Sicily. They've already done one in mainland Italy. Now they're doing another one in mainland Italy to bypass the German defenses. And that's at Anzio. And the Rangers are tasked, as always in typical fashion, to go knock out batteries, seize the ports, seize the town, knock out the piers, secure certain vital key points, and allow follow-on forces to come in. And it was like a sweet charm, like nothing. Whereas they had gotten hit in Sicily, they had very, very minor, if any, opposition landing in mainland Italy until they hit the mountain ranges. In Anzio, they had nothing. They just walked literally in, and there was nobody there. They killed some people. They knocked out a few things here and there, but in the quagmire and the fog of war that you have, they did kill a few Italian civilians, like they did in Sicily also. People get killed, sadly enough for them, in the crossfire. And there's some great moments, actually, that some of them preserved, that's in the book, in the Houdini Club, of seeing these Italian civilians and, the destruction that had been brought upon them by not just Rangers, but the war in general. And of course, there's also a lot of talk about prisoners and things like that, Italians, and how cruel Italian soldiers were when they had the upper hand. It's all very fascinating stuff. But anyway, they land in Anzio. They do a great job. And instead of pushing out quickly to seize Rome and to drive south, while simultaneously the Allied army is pushing from the south north to get through this winter line, these German defenses, they take too long. The Germans are rushing reinforcements in literally within a day and bringing in some hardcore units. And they had bad luck for the Rangers. They already had a couple of veteran units that were recovering themselves from the winter line and from Sicily and other places there. But the Germans brought troops from all over Europe. Once the Allies landed in Anzio, the decision had been made to fight all the way up through the boot of Italy by the German planners. They brought in everybody they could throw in. I read some German accounts because, I grew up in Germany, so I speak German. I bought some German books, talked to some German dudes who knew something about this, that, and the other, read some German accounts. Um, and ultimately, what is supposed to happen, the Allies are finally deciding to push out after about a week or 10 days of being bogged down, being in these artillery duels that are just wiping everybody out. And Allied intelligence says, hey, the German main line of resistance is beyond this town that the Rangers are going to take. It's beyond that, not in front of it. It's beyond that. We also have more tanks. We have more airplanes. We have more artillery pieces. So we're going to win this shooting war. But let's all push out at the same time out of this beachhead, expand, and drive the Germans back. And our intel tells us the Germans, they're going to flee. The second we start pushing, they're going to take off. They have a lot of Polish soldiers in their German Wehrmacht units, things like that. They have some fascists still fighting with them there, but they're not hardened enough. They don't have it in them to fight. They're going to retreat once we start hitting them. So the Rangers are tasked with taking this key rail highway town called Cisterna. And I've been there twice, actually. I went there in 99. And I should also say I was very lucky. I had a good friend of mine, an Air Force puke, retired, who was also part of the cemeteries that we maintain overseas. He was a superintendent of those. And speaks fluent Italian, lives in Italy. He's American, though, as apple pie. And he came with me. We went to Anzio. We went to Cisterna, talked to a bunch of Italians. This was really fantastic. Anyway, so Rangers tasked with taking out Cisterna. That's their job. Meanwhile, on the left and right of the Rangers, Allies are going to do the same thing. They're going to push up, interdict these highways, stop German reinforcements, do all this stuff, all this wonderful, thinking they had. And so the Rangers take off, and they're basically what they have is there's one road that leads north. I call it north, not quite, but let's just call it north for argument's sake. And that was going to be where the 4th Ranger Battalion was going to launch 2 hours after the assault battalions departed from the main line of departure. So 1st and 3rd Ranger Battalion were tasked with advancing up this canal, the Mussolini Canal, the ditch, because the whole area is like a billiard table. I mean, there's no cover, there's nothing, there's no real concealment. The only concealment you have are ditches. Some of them are knee high and others are a little bit higher. And the Mussolini Canal was higher. So the 1st Battalion leads the way. I forget now what time, probably 0100, something like that when it's dark. And they lead the way. And their goal is to not engage with any opposition whatsoever. None. They're supposed to push through, capture Cisterna. 3rd Ranger Battalion is following on their heels. They're going to tackle any German opposition that they're going to encounter. They're going to fight any battle, because the key thing is 1st Bat needs to get into Cisterna, seize it, control it, and everybody else will be doing the same along the highway, and so the world will be wonderful. So 1st Bat takes off, 3rd Bat is behind him. And, I have read accounts where people say, the Rangers weren't all that well trained. They made a lot of noise. Overwhelmingly, the accounts I've read is the Rangers were quiet. I mean, apart from sloshing, which you will have, as you know, anytime you do any night ops, you'll have some noise. No matter how much we try to tape down our stuff, how much we jump up and down before we go out, there'll be some noise, but I don't think it's anything that would have led to discovery. So they take off. Darby's behind with 4th Ranger Battalion. They're just waiting. Oddly enough, something really weird happens. The radios that were supposed to accompany 1st and 3rd Bat, maybe it was just 1st Bat, I don't remember now, didn't make it, didn't manage to hook up. So here's your lead element, your 2 lead battalions with almost non-existent comms to headquarters. Now, since it never really happened, they've had problems in the past, but they've always been able to sort of, because they were smaller or more defined, whatever. But so that's a weird thing that happened, just, one of those fortunes of war or misfortunes of war. Anyway, 1st Battalion takes off. They hear Germans. They can hear them. They're marching by them. They're going down. Now they're having to cross a highway, this one major road that travels north, that 4th Battalion will eventually come up on. And the Germans have vehicles going up and down this thing, patrolling the whole time. So the Rangers piecemeal are trying to cross without drawing attention to it, right? I mean, can you imagine? Middle of the night, dark, and you see these fucking Germans coming up and down, and some of them are self-propelled tanks, some of them these half tracks, but there's heavy German traffic, contrary to what Intel had said, right? Anyway, there's a break in line in 1st Battalion. Elements of 1st Battalion make it across this road towards Cisterna into this big field that's just south of Cisterna, which I eventually call the Triangle of Death, which is something like maybe 1,000 yards on the 3 sides, and Cisterna being at the apex. So elements of 1st Bat make it in there. Then there's a break, of course, with the second half of 1st Battalion. Schanstrom is sent back from 1st Battalion to go find him. He sends a runner. They locate 1st Battalion, the rear elements of the companies. Those guys make it across the road. Now 3rd Battalion has a break from 1st Battalion. They don't know where 1st Battalion is. They too deal with this. The now battalion commander, Major Alva Miller, who I like very much, and I cover a lot of him in there because I think he's a great human being, actually. I was very sad when I wrote his stuff because he wrote a great poem, which I put in there verbatim. But he's there with his comms team trying to establish communications with 1st Bat. They're just trying to establish sporadic communications here. And he's looking up to try to get better reception. And he gets hit by some tank shell and his head gets blown off, splatters his party. Other people get wounded. So here's your command element of 3rd Ranger Battalion shattered, dead. Battalion commander gone. Other guys are gone. But this is the greatness, I think, of even today's Ranger Battalion. People step up. Natural leadership. Guys who've been trained step up. Eventually, they manage to lead most of 3rd Bat across. Miller, of course, and a bunch of people are dead. Meanwhile, there's a 1st Battalion has killed a bunch of German sentries, cutting their throats, maybe kidneys, but I think it was mostly the old-fashioned pull the neck back and drive that knife and push it forward through the throat. But a couple sentries make noise, maybe one, but maybe a couple. But they had eliminated a few, and they run into this German company that's literally in front of them. They're in ditches, in tents, and the Rangers just run through them in a mad, crazed dash, emptying their magazines, stabbing people, throwing hand grenades, running toward little farmhouses. It's just hell. But I think they killed pretty much everybody. The Germans are running, the Rangers are running, more Rangers are coming into this field. And eventually what you have is Germans on your right, Germans to your front, and Germans to your left. And so the battalions deploy. 1st Ranger Battalion has arrived. They hit the apex of Cisterna at the very top of this triangle, and then they line up along the road, which runs a little south. And then 3rd Battalion is sort of sporadically on the flanks and the rear securing those areas. And they establish a headquarters at a place called Calcabrini House, which my buddy Angelo found. And he even found the son of a farmer who still has the farm where all these Rangers basically bled to death at the end of the day and got captured. And we had great stories from that guy. I mean, those Italian guys, man, they have an appreciation for American history over there from World War II, I'll tell you that. But anyway, so the Rangers are deployed, 1st Battalion, engaging Germans, machine guns, tanks. Tanks are going up and down these 2 highways that are intersecting Cisterna. German troops are rushing down. Meanwhile, on the left and right side of this Ranger force, nobody has moved. They got pinned down literally the minute they got stepped up. 4th Ranger Battalion, trying to use this one road, which had launched 2 hours later, barely makes it maybe 200, 300, 400 yards before they're pinned down. And the farmhouses that are made of stone have been reinforced with machine gun nests and well camouflaged ones. And Ranger Battalion pushed hard, actually 4th Battalion took more KIAs than 1st and 3rd ultimately. And everybody is stuck. And so the Rangers are there, bazooka teams are firing, great heroic individual shit. I mean, people are climbing onto tanks, throwing hand grenades and ripping things open, basically running into farmhouses that have Germans in them all of a sudden. I mean, it's some crazy shit, I mean, close. And I was at that road, at one of the roads, which was to the left of Cisterna as you're looking at it from the ranger's perspective. And there's maybe 30 meters distance, maybe 25, and this is machine gun fire coming your way. So first bat is in a firefight, maybe less than a dozen, half a dozen guys make it into Cisterna and get slaughtered. I mean, it's just like crazy, crazy stuff. So they consolidate, they're running low on ammo. Runners are sent to third bat to get ammunition. Half the ammo gets sent forward. Germans are sending in more troops. And the Germans, they run out of ammo, their tanks. They just drive back a kilometer, reload, rearm, refuel, come back and start shooting you. And then the Rangers, meanwhile, are running out of bazookas, running out of grenades. What do they have? Small arms. And, small arms isn't going to punch through any tank. So eventually they just get crushed. Repeated attempts by fourth to get through are defeated. Darby is desperately trying to get artillery to come in, but they don't have proper communications. By the time they establish proper communications, they can't call for fire correctly because they can't identify where exactly the Germans are without endangering all the Rangers. So you don't get any support whatsoever. Tanks are supposed to come to support. They get bogged down. Tanks get shot down on this road. It's just like, it's a gargantuan mess on the entire Allied front. And the Rangers pushed, I think, the furthest from all of them. So ultimately, some Rangers start to surrender. The Germans line them up and move them forward at gunpoint, drive them toward the center of the Rangers around this Calcabrini house, which is in the middle of this field. And the aid station is near it. And a couple of Rangers, of course, shoot at the Germans. And the Germans go stab, bayonet these Ranger prisoners that they have. And they have a loudspeaker. They're like, we're going to kill you. Drop your guns. We're going to kill everybody here, blah, blah, blah. So more and more Rangers start to surrender. Low on ammo, makes sense to me. And Schunstrom and this other lieutenant, Fredericks, Sam, they're a veteran. Like, they've been with the Derby Rangers forever. They're like, we're going to ambush these guys. We're going to ambush these Germans driving these prisoners, four across, probably 4 or 8 deep at some point. We're going to ambush them. And unfortunately, a couple of Rangers fired too early. So the Germans start mowing down POWs, and basically that's that. And a lot of Rangers start burying their weapons, destroy their gear, whatever radios they had, stuff like that. And they surrender. 4th Battalion, of course, keeps fighting. And then we have a couple, we have some people escaping. A lot of people actually managed to escape, not just 6 or 7. That's a myth. More managed to escape. They just come in slowly but surely. And there's some great stories, but they're in the book if someone is really interested in. So 1st and 3rd Bat surrender. They all think they're going to get mowed down and killed. But instead, they're treated fairly well. The medics and doctors on both sides are patching people up, that kind of stuff. And of course, the lot of the prisoners, not a good one. And the Rangers and other Allied prisoners get paraded in front of the Roman Colosseum, where I went to. And there's some wonderful plaques there for the Rangers and the 1st Special Service Force, Canadian-American unit, right by the Colosseum. But they went there and they were paraded and given a wonderful propaganda tour by the Germans. And anyway, so that's 1st and 3rd. So they're captured, they're going to go to jail. 4th Battalion has fought hard, taken massive casualties for their size, lots of casualties. And eventually the attack grounds down, and much later they finally push through and everything, but they level everything. The Allies just level everything subsequently. So 1st Bat, 3rd Bat, the guys are POWs. A lot of them are in Italy right now, and they're going to be, in process, check out, and then shipped off to Germany. And so you have Italian, you have Canadian, you have Rangers who, there's a great story with a Canadian guy, but forget that. There are Rangers, of course, now, some of whom are, Depression era kids who grew up poor, who grew up in New York, or grew up in farms. They're like hardened individuals, and war has made them harder. And they're not the kind of people who just say, okay, I'm just going to go serve out the rest of my time in prison if I don't have to. So we have great escape stories. We have escape stories of people escaping from the camps in Italy. Like Schönstrom is one of the first to escape. He has some great stories. He spends, I
That's what
forget now,
the
6 months.
Houdini Club is, the guys who escape.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a history of Darby's Rangers, and it's got probably 8, 9 stories of these guys in them. So, and we have Schönstrom, he spent 6 months in Italy fighting with partisans, murdering Germans left, right, and sideways until he makes it back to friendly lines. And we have other guys who escape from the boxcars. Some great stories about them. There's really a funny stories. There's a window and it's got barbed wire. And so the Rangers pick up the smallest Ranger they could find, the lightest, smallest Ranger they could find. They pick him up and use him as a battering ram to punch through the barbed wire. It's amazing stuff. And so they climb out, they jump off the trains, things like that. And some of them go murder Italians. They go knock on a door, a guy opens it, and they barge in, steal everything they can, including a shotgun, and they walk into the hills and kill him with a knife because they don't want to attract noise by German roving patrols or fascist patrols. And so we have a lot of those kinds of stories. We also have some guys who all end up all the way in Germany, repeated attempts, had their teeth kicked in or just got destroyed physically, lost half their body weight and had to fight other allies for food. And then there are these escape committees. But and I try to have a diverse number because there isn't that much material, but there's probably enough material for 20 or 30 guys. But the book, to be fair to the publisher, the contract was limited to a number of pages, and I went well above and beyond that. And to be very fair, it's the publishers, the owner of Diversion Books, Alex Scott Waxman, I think, and Keith Wallman. They came to me midway through writing the Darby history book. They said, "Hey, listen, I know you have a chapter on the Houdini Club. Do you think you can make it bigger? Can we put it throughout the book?" Of course, I'm not a person to say no. so I spent a considerable amount of time researching more POW stories. And there's a former Ranger officer who wrote a great book in the 90s. His name is Clarence Maltesen, who got captured at Cisterna. And really, the majority of the work is from him and from a lot of the interviews that have been conducted over the years by people who then submitted to the Library of Congress. I got a few letters, of course, also. I've talked to some people, but there are a couple key books that aren't available readily that were extremely helpful. And the guy even mapped out the maps, like this is where I think these people got out and stuff like that. So we have great stories from escapes from Italian POW camps, escaping boxcars, trying to escape in Germany, some really brutal stuff, the treatment of the Soviet POWs in these camps who were being starved to death. There's a story in there, I give away the punchline here, but I don't know if it is one, where these Soviet troops had been starved so badly, and one of our Rangers is on this burial detail, so he sees these guys. And they managed to get a German shepherd that was one of the guard dogs to come close to him, and they grabbed him and tore him apart and ate him. I mean, that's in there. I put it in there, not for that, but because the guy has an incredible escape story. But it shows to you the brutish nature of the Germans during that time. And of course, we're also talking about bad treatment of Jews and Arabs by the Germans, Italians in North Africa and Italy and all that stuff. And in the concentration camps, the work camps. I mean, it's brutal. So we have Rangers going through some of the worst things. And one of these Rangers, most incredible story, whatever it is, he gets captured, he goes there, he's on this burial detail for Soviets, he buries 10, 20 prisoners every day on a push cart, and he's losing weight, there's no food, they give us very little food. And he says, I pushed some people over into these mass graves and they were still alive, and then they get buried alive. And in any event, he eventually manages to escape. He gets captured twice, I think. On his third time or fourth time, he manages to escape, but he's got all his teeth shattered. He's completely broken, but he said it was my duty to escape, and he does escape. But oh my God, the voyage. He travels throughout Germany, goes into the East, goes into the Ukraine, into Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, finally gets on board after he gets fucked with by the Soviet guards right in front of this American ship that is his basically the place to go. And he finally makes it, and he weighed like 1 pound. I'm exaggerating, but he was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you survived. I really don't know how you survived. That is a Houdini club right there. It's
Tell us a
amazing.
little bit about Sundstrom's epilogue and his interesting post-service career.
Yeah, there's a great debt owed to his family, as well as another, I want to say, Ranger Chetwin, who did great work on Sundstrom, research on everything. I mean, they sent me his stuff, and it was like 600 pages. I should also give a shout out to Stephen Mead's descendants, who gave me 600 pages of stuff they had accumulated on him. Stephen Mead was one of the original Ranger officers who had a bad hernia or appendectomy operation in North Africa, and then became staff officer for the invasion of Italy with some other unit, and then becomes a CIA troubleshooter in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s in the Middle East. Great story. So there have been some great people who've helped me on this book. Sundstrom is arguably my favorite. I even put together a Ranger Hall of Fame nomination packet for him that was backed by 2 members of the association, including Bob Black, who I love very much. He may even have passed or will be soon. And it got rejected, by the way. That's a great shame on the committee. They should have really, that's a guy who should be. Sundstrom is a hero. Call him a psychopath, call him a bravest of the brave. A lot of accounts have said he should have gotten a Medal of Honor. No Ranger got a Medal of Honor. No Derby Ranger has ever received a Medal of Honor. Sundstrom, returns from prison camp, all that stuff. He gets sent to the U.S. He has malaria. He's deaf in 1 year. He's been wounded. He's got mental health issues, and I've read his psychological assessments that were done in 1944 in Tennessee, whatever medical facility it was, and he's talking all about the challenges of killing people and the need to go kill people and how horrible it was, how scared he was, but he couldn't let people know he was scared. And he tried to talk to Darby about it, but Darby didn't want to hear about it. And, so he had some issues, but to be fair, that guy, I think he's the man you want if you want to win battles and wars. That's a Sundstrom. You want that guy, and everybody should want someone like him. He might endanger your lives, but ultimately he gets the job done, and really that's our jobs, isn't it? Or your job, as it were. But Sundstrom, I think, really a good-looking guy. I mean, movie star quality. He gets to work on the story of G.I. Joe as a tech advisor, and on another one, I forget now what it was, but so he gets to work a little bit. He gets a taste of Hollywood. Phil Stern, of course, is back in Hollywood after his combat camera experience. Jamal Thierry is working in Hollywood. Roy Murray gets asked to come and tech advise. So Sundstrom is trying to become an actor. He's trying to join Hollywood unions, electrician union. They won't let him in. He's going broke. I'm sure he's drinking a lot. He beats his wife. He's now living sort of, by himself in LA. I think he's still married at the time. And, he's hanging out with people that I would probably think aren't that great. Fast forward, he's having real problems adapting to civilian life. I mean, serious problems. He's not getting really any help. It's not like today, I think, where it's much, much better than it was even in my time. And I don't think he talks to a lot of people about his war experiences, but he's in LA trying to make a living in LA, like me, except he had to accomplish things in World War II. And he just can't get it done. So he goes on a robbery streak. So he robs something like half a dozen gas stations at gunpoint for I don't even know, a couple of $100 maybe at the most at the end of the day. Of course, he gets captured. And of course, he says his weapon was unloaded. I don't know if that's true or not. And when I lived in Los Angeles and I had heard that he had done that and that there was a court record, I went down to the Superior Court of LA and a super really nice, cool clerk told me it's sealed. We're not allowed to hand this out. And I said, but look, I wrote this small, skinny 64-page book, and here's his picture. Is there any way I can get it? She goes, well, let me talk to my superior. Come back in half an hour. I came back. She had made me a copy of the summary of the court judgment. So
why was it still sealed after all those years?
Because, my dear Jack, Rangers cannot talk smack about Rangers. So all the World War II Ranger officers who came to court to speak up on his behalf, one of them, maybe Altieri, maybe Murray, didn't want really bad publicity to come out. I mean, it was covered in newspapers. It was there, but there was a lot of stuff, I think, in the judgment that sort of just said PTSD kind of stuff, right? Battle fatigue. So I think they just really wanted to keep it to whatever it had been with newspapers at that time. So anyway, it was sealed. They gave me a copy. In the meanwhile, I've sent it to 3 people. One is to Schunstrom, one is to another Ranger researcher, and one is a Ranger historian. But I read all that. I researched it quite a bit. Eventually, what happens is the judge blames the government and says that the government did nothing to help veterans adjust to civilian life, that he was guilty by not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. So it's just a hiccup. He was otherwise perfectly fine and all that. And then the California Criminal Code, and I think this was the first time PTSD, or whatever it was called, the equivalent battle fatigue, battle shock, at that time, it was the first time it was used in a defense in a criminal case in California. And it entered legislature or some kind of records over there and all that. But eventually Chuck leaves and moves to Buffalo, New York, and doesn't have a very fulfilling life, although I think he's trying to get into radio. He's a house painter, which he hates. He also paints boats. He drinks a lot. The VA charged him for dental care to the point where supposedly he got so mad he took all his medals and threw them somewhere in the street of Buffalo. I would pay to have those, but I've never found them. He went and bought some alcohol one day at a liquor store and died of a heart attack at age 52.
Wow.
And I went to the liquor store. It's still there. So that's Schunstrom, and I find it exceptionally sad. And it's a guy who was really marked by war, but who is the epitome. Maybe I'm wrong, but he is the American fighting man. You know, he stuck that bayonet into someone because he was told that he needed to take this hill.
It's interesting that, that generation just kind of had to swallow it and live with it, eat it. There wasn't treatment available. And I mean, that's even emblematic in the sealing of the court record. Like this stuff is buried. Like we don't talk about it.
Yeah, it's true. And, and I tried to get the actual transcripts because they have, court reporters there that are stenographers. And I was able to find out who it was and the judge and all that stuff. But unfortunately, all their possessions had been sold or were thrown out when they all died. So I think that summary court judgment is the only thing I have, unless somebody has something in their closet that they just don't even know they have. So, but Schunstrom, I got a lot of material from his friends and family, and there's a great dedication by one of the fellow Rangers, which I put in the book, which talks about how he died alone. His body wasn't even claimed for 2 days, and he was a great Ranger and hard done by. He never complained about it, and he sought solace in alcohol, basically. And it's a sad story, and I love him. I'm not ashamed to say I actually love the guy, much like I love other guys, Rangers, that I admire greatly. I'm like, you are, idols. I look at you and I go, you've done some great stuff, and you seem to be really great people despite this. And one of them, there's a great guy, Harrison Lehman, who became a lawyer, also an escapee, a Houdini Club guy, who'd done a lot of work with me here and there. He was in North Africa, and he was hitching a ride to his old unit to catch up with some buddies while he was with the Rangers. And they're driving, and he's in the back of this Jeep, and they're driving by this old Arab dude on a donkey, and the passenger in the Jeep kicks out and knocks the old Arab off his camel. And Lehman got so fucking mad, and he pulled out his gun, shoved it in the driver's head, told him to stop. He got out, helped the Arab back up on his donkey or mule, I think donkey. And meanwhile, of course, these guys took off. But that to have that sense of humanity still, when you have just been in war, you've just killed Frenchmen, colonial troops, shot at Germans, and then you're some innocent dude, and you're still willing to help. I thought that was great. So there are things like that I think have been terrific in the research I've done over the decades and having met some of these guys. So anyway,
the book,
but Sundstrom, yes.
The book is The Houdini Club. It's going to be out next month in April for you guys. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we get going? Anywhere else, anything else you want to tell people about, or other projects coming up?
Yeah, I will tell you this. If you're a ranger, Jack and Dave, you guys have to go to Carrickfergus. Any Derby Ranger enthusiast ought to go to Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland. They are very welcoming. You have to go look at the Ranger Rock that was built in 92, I think it was. You have to look at the tiny U.S. Ranger Museum they have. They have other displays in their city hall. You have to go there. And the other thing is, if you're ever on vacation, if you go to Sicily, North Africa too, but I didn't go there, time, money, and all that. But if you go to Sicily or you go to Italy, take a look at some of these things and then think about, hey, D-Day, everybody's talking about Normandy. But I tell you what, there are 5 Normandies before Normandy, and there's some very savage, brutal ones, especially in Jela, So, no, I think that's the thing. I would tell people go to Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland, near Belfast. Great vacation if you go. Go to Sicily, Italy if you can. Those are great things. If you can support some of the U.S. Army heritage museums, things like that at Carlisle Barracks, do so, with cuts. I'm sure they're going to get hit, like a lot of government employees. They're a great facility. I love them very much. And in terms of books, I don't know. I'm tinkering maybe with another nonfiction book. But if Alec can sell my novel, I will embrace novel writing. So other than that, I urge anybody to preserve history. And in our case, it's Ranger history. Do that. Preserve Ranger history. Write it. In my opinion, there are truly today only 2 real Ranger history books. That's Bob Black's Ranger Force, which I love very much, and mine, humbly speaking. But it is a history as much as I can put in. It's probably 30% of my research. And I would just tell people, World War II is more than Normandy. It's not Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. There's a lot of stuff going on here. But the publisher was great. They allowed me to go well beyond what they wanted. So it was fantastic. And I really appreciate you, as a former 375 guy, putting up with 275 for this long, talking about
it's the history of my battalion too. That got really jacked up there in the mountains.
Licata and the mountains, absolutely.
So yeah, thank you for writing it. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I was saying this to we had an SF warrant on here the other day, Yatsik, who wrote he published a OSS memoir that he found. Like he found it in an archive, unpublished. And it's just fascinating. Like if you had come to me and asked me about this, I'd tell you my opinion would be there's no more original primary source material to be found about the war. Like we have what we have. There's not going to be anything new found. And you guys, authors like you and him, keep proving that wrong.
Yeah. But you got to dig. You got to do your homework, right?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, of course, to get the good stuff, you always got to dig. That's how it is.
Yeah, always. Anyway, thank you again very much. Say hi to Dave.
I will. Mir, we have a one question for you from a viewer.
Oh, sure, yeah.
From M. Corbin. I've been trying to piece together the story of a World War II veteran I was lucky enough to have in my life. With the NARA archive being gone, would there be a lead in the French records, considering he was awarded the Croix de Guerre with
Well,
it?
yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, you should try. You should always try, but don't be disheartened by the fact that a lot of records were torched. If you have the name and you have their number, their ID number, talk to like the people at Carlisle Barracks. Talk to one of the reference librarians. I have like 4 pages of acknowledgments in the back. If you get it, there'll be a QR code eventually. Look through those. There are some people there that are amazing. I mean, I'm thanking a librarian who was online because I'm like, hey man, all these maps are missing. And he's like, oh, and then, hour later he mails me and goes, I found them all. Here they are. I put them up. But you never know. Reference librarians are the greatest human beings on the planet. They will find things that you didn't think you could find. So I wouldn't give up on it. If you have the name, you have a number, you have some ID on him, you have ideas of the campaigns he was in, you'd be surprised. It's just a lot of work, and sometimes it's pure luck. Michigan State, I'm sorry, I'm answering this lengthily, but Michigan State, I reached out to find out about this officer, Major Alva Miller. And I just emailed this reference librarian. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this 1935, whatever. And she comes back with 50 things. And I said, hey, what is this? And she comes back with 10 more things. And it's those people, I swear to you, it's those people you normally don't think about that'll find you something and it'll get you going.
Yeah.
So don't give up on it. You can do this.
Okay. Well, that's it, Mir. That's a show. Thank you for coming on. And I hope people will check out the Houdini Club, going to be out in April.
Yep.
Anywhere people can go to find you, Mir, if they want to connect with you?
I have a website. You can see my ugly face on there. There's a small Ranger history on it. But yeah, you can contact me that way through. It has a contact form. If you have any questions, send them my way. I'm usually same day response.
We'll put a link to your website in the description for the podcast too, for viewers or listeners who want to check that out.
Awesome. And like I said, I'm proud of the book, and a lot of people helped me write the book. So that's key, to acknowledge those people. So
that's awesome.
Anyway,
well,
thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have you back on again. I know you're working on other projects. We will speak again, and I'll see you this summer, right?
Yes, you will see me in a few months. And our next project we will be discussing is Canadian snipers in Afghanistan with Barry Nisbet and Gordon Cullen. Talk about human computers who know how to snipe.
I'm looking forward to
these guys.
That's awesome.
All right. Thanks again.
Mir. Have a nice evening.
All right.
And
You
we'll
too.
see all
Thank
of you
you.
next time.
Okay.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page, and there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers, and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.